Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. I'm back today in my little spooky Halloween jumper because I am going to talk about 5 different history books that are similarly spooky, all to do with the history of death. This is one of my little niche topics of interest, looking at the history of death practices. I don't know particularly why, it's just something that I find really fascinating. I don't consider myself to be a particularly spooky kind of person. I'm not really into true crime or anything like that, but I do find how attitudes to death have evolved, changed, or stayed the same over time to be really fascinating. The fact that we are all going to die is the one thing that we all have in common, and it's really interesting to see how different people over millennia have dealt with that fact. All of these books are pretty fun and accessible, despite that some of them are touching upon some grisly topics. So without much further ado, let's just get straight into these books. First up, we have Grave Tidings by Paul Berra. This, as the subtitle suggests, is an anthology of famous last words. So we are going through lots of different people, from writers, actors, politicians, heads of state, and looking at their last words. Each different figure who is covered gets a one-page spread with their last words, and then a section below which is kind of a mini biography that gives context to these last words. One thing I will note about this is I don't always think some of these last words are accurate. I don't think these are all coming from legitimate sources. I think some of them are just what people's last words are thought to be. And the reason I noticed this is because they include Anne Boleyn in here, and as a big Tudor history fan, I am pretty familiar with the execution of Anne Boleyn and how that all played out those last days. And so when I turned to the Anne Boleyn one and noticed that it said, "The executioner is, I believe, very expert, and my neck is very slender," that caused some alarm bells to ring, because those are not Anne Boleyn's last words, which is that she stood up on the scaffold at the Tower of London, made her speech in which she said that she was there condemned to die, and she was beseeching everybody to pray for the life of the king. After which we know that she knelt down and she started praying, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul, Lord Jesus receive my soul." Yes, the line about her having a very slender neck is, it's kind of funny. It shows her humour and her wit in some of her last days, but it's not accurate to say that those were her last words, and that is the little quibble that I have about this book, is I do kind of doubt some of the validity. However, I will note that the final lines that they do have in here are quite fun. Some favourite ones within here is the infamous Oscar Wilde alleged last lines. I don't know if this is actually true that he said this, and I am doubting it more and more. "I am in a duel to death with this wallpaper. One of us has to go." Del Close: "Thank God. I'm tired of being the funniest person in the room." Eugene O'Neill: "I knew it. Born in a hotel room and goddammit died in a hotel room." John Barrymore: "Die? I should say not, dear fellow. No Barrymore would allow such a conventional thing to happen to him." Viscount Palmerston: "Die, my dear doctor? That's the last thing I should do." Finally, Coco Chanel: "You see, this is how you die." So even though I do doubt some of the validity of some of these, I think it could be a good little gift that could provide a little light wit and humour. Next up we have Rest in Pieces, The Curious Fates of Famous Corpses by Bess Lovejoy. As the title suggests, this is going through different famous people. Once again, like Grave Tidings, we have a whole host of different figures in here, and the curious, mysterious, sometimes pretty grisly things that happened to their bodies following their deaths. It is split up into various chapters, so we have Saints and Sinners, Science and Medicine, Crime and Punishment, Unsolved Mysteries, Body Politics, Lost and Found, Collectible Corpses, Love and Devotion, and Last Wishes. And then within those chapters, we have a cluster of different figures, going from Thomas More to Galileo, Eva Peron to Adolf Hitler, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart to John Milton. We are looking at bodies who, despite the title, were not able to rest in peace. Whether they were stolen, used for science, some were put on display, some collected them. Eva Peron's body, we know, was stolen and went missing for I think 19 years. Percy Bysshe Shelley, who upon being cremated, his heart wouldn't burn, and so his wife Mary Shelley ended up keeping it to hold on to something dear of her husband's. It is told once again in a very engaging, witty way, which does make light a lot of the time of some of these goings on, but I think is still respectful. For something a little bit shorter, we have this little ditty, Unfortunate Ends, on Murder and Misadventure in Medieval England by Soren Lilly. This is looking at the real life cases of everyday working class people, how these different individual figures met their demise, and what it has to say about medieval England. And it uses various historical records, inquest diary entries, news reports from the time. In tone, it is very informative and definitely has moments of being scholarly, but is also a little bit irreverent. The stories in here are adapted and expanded upon from the Medieval Deathbot, which was a Twitter account, I don't know if it's still active, which every single day would post a different interesting medieval death. From dying from being too drunk, to getting in a fight that went astray, to a rogue candle setting your house ablaze. We're seeing all these different various ways in which medieval people met their makers. Next up we have the excellently titled A Fatal Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum by Emma Southon. Honestly, one of the best titles on my bookshelf. In this, Emma Southon, who is a historian of ancient Rome, looks at the different ways in which murder was pretty ubiquitous in ancient Rome. From murder for entertainment with the gladiators, to political assassinations, to slavery, and to just general everyday disagreements between the citizens of Rome. Emma Southon's argument is that murder was just something that was so very present that by the time you get to the end of the book, you are kind of questioning how it was that people felt even slightly safe going out of their door. Like Unfortunate Ends, what I really like about Emma Southon's writing is that it is at both times scholarly as well as kind of irreverent and funny. There is a lot of wit, humour and modern day cultural references peppered into her writing, and it just makes it so very enjoyable. And it makes a topic that is pretty dark about how violence and murder was just so very common not feel like quite such a gut punch. Though I have to say, the section where she talks about crucifixion and what crucifixion did to the body, oh, like I did know, but the more that I had to kind of think about it, the more I was like, oh no, oh no. How does anybody think that that is an okay thing to do to another person? Horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And then finally, we have Death by Shakespeare. Snake Bites, Stabbings and Broken Hearts by Kathryn Harkup. This is a book that, as you can imagine, is about Shakespeare. It is going through the different deaths that appear in his books, the myriad ways in which characters have died in Shakespeare plays, but it's also looking at the context of Tudor England and the kind of events and goings on that Shakespeare may have been inspired by. We start with A Brief Life of Shakespeare, which gives us a good grounding and context into the influence that death had on his life and just generally in Elizabethan and Jacobean England at large. The book then goes into each kind of death that appears in Shakespeare, adding a little bit of science, but is largely about the plays and the history and the literary relevance for them. In this, we are looking at poisoning, plague, drowning, exiting pursued by a bear, among many other different ways that Shakespearean characters met their ends. And yeah, I think if you've got a Shakespeare fan in your life, this is definitely a must read. So there we go, those are 5 histories of death that I have read and really enjoyed. This is definitely a topic that I am keen to read more into because, as we say, it is the one thing that we all have in common. And I think we are so conditioned in the 21st century to be afraid of that fact and to kind of push it away, not think about it. And that is not really what historically people were doing. People, because they saw it more often, because they didn't have the benefits of modern medicine, people saw death as a much more everyday part of their lives rather than something that visits you every now and again and that you can otherwise just not think about. And I think obviously there are good and bad things that means mentally, emotionally, physically for you. But honestly, I don't think it does people any good to not think about it or to be afraid of it. And I think what a lot of these books kind of show is that if you have a bit more of a light-hearted take on death, if you can find the humour in it, it kind of takes away its sting. Please let me know about your thoughts on any of the books that I have spoken about today. Alternatively, please do let me know about any recommendations you have for the history of death. I also have a fiction version of this video where I'm looking at different fictional depictions of death as a character, immortality, it deals with death, which might also appeal to you this spooky season. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.